Sabbath greetings to you all, my brothers and sisters. We are super excited that you are able to join us from wherever you are watching us from. We are going to give you another exciting lesson for today, but before we start, I would love to remind you, especially if you are joining us today for the first time, that we have already looked at lesson 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and today we are looking at lesson 19. In lesson 14, we have learned so far that Jeremiah was a fearless man, appointed by God himself, that he was a prophet through whom God spoke, but he was hated by his own countrymen. Why? Because he was a fearless man, very determined to rebuke evil whenever he saw it. And in lesson 15, we learned how he met Hananiah. This Hananiah happened to be a false prophet. He prophesied that children of Israel were going to be delivered from captivity. Yet, God had his own appointed time. God said 70 years, Hananiah said 2 years. And he insisted that his prophecies were also from God. But at the end of the day, it was prophesied in his life that he would die for continuing in prophesying wrong things about Israel. So the false prophecies that he embraced terminated his life earlier than expected. And in lesson number 16, we learned about characteristics of a false and a true prophet of God. And in here we learned that the very first foundation of every person who claims to be a prophet should be adherence to the 10 commandments of God. If one is found wanting in one of them, that person disqualifies him or herself from being a prophet of God. And thereafter, we learned about the children of Israel who were given a chance to go and start reconstruction of their temple, which was once destroyed, and that they were super excited, but it happened that their work was frustrated because there were people who came, the Samaritans, who came to offer service, but when they were turned down, they conspired against the work which was about to start to reconstruct the temple in Jerusalem. And years later, again a decree was made. The first decree to go and reconstruct Jerusalem was made by Cyrus. But when this failed, the builders went to their day-to-day businesses. But after some years, again Darius came on back and he asked to say the temple should be reconstructed. He made a decree and they went back to start the reconstruction. With difficulties, they started, and many reports against the children of Israel were made, but they persisted and they consulted with Darius, who gave a confirmation that indeed Cyrus had made a decree and that the temple was to continue to be constructed so that the name of God can be glorified once again. And in today's lesson, which is lesson number 19 for Sabbath, May 9, 2020, we are going to look at reconstruction, vigilance, and defense. That is today's lesson, lesson number 19. Reconstruction, vigilance, and defense. So we are hoping that you're going to enjoy this lesson and apply what we are going to read into our lives today. So let's go into the introductory text. It says, the people in general were animated with the heart and one soul of patriotism and cheerful activity. Men of ability and influence organized the various classes of citizens into companies, each leader making himself responsible for the erection of a certain portion of the wall. It was a sight well pleasing to God and angels to see the busy companies working harmoniously upon the broken down walls of Jerusalem, and it was joyous sound to hear the noise of instruments of labor from the earliest dawn till the stars appeared. Christian Service, page 175. So we can see that these people were committed. From the very beginning, they were super excited. They were animated invigorated and energized to make sure that the temple of God was reconstructed, and that they grouped themselves. Each group ensured that they did a certain column or portion of the construction of the temple, and it was done, and that it was a joyous moment, and God was well pleased that even his angels came to attend this work which was happening. And even today, if you and I are committed, there's so much that can be done, because God wants us to be committed and to have our hearts into the work that we have started. Then God and his angels will attend to us. God cannot attend to confusion or disorderliness. He wants organization, like what we have read from the introductory text. Let's go into question number 1 under the subheading, More Enemy Attacks and Reliance on God. Question 1 says, who was furious when the reconstruction of the city walls began to advance under Nehemiah's leadership? What can be seen in the enemy's verbal attacks? But it came to pass that when Sanballat heard that we had builded the wall, he was wroth, and took great indignation, and mocked the Jews. And he spake before his brethren and the army of Samaria, and said, what do these feeble Jews? Will they fortify themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they make an end in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of the rubbish which are burned? Now Tobiah the Ammonite was by him, and he said, even that which they build, if a fox go up, he shall even break down their stone wall. In his many activities, Nehemiah did not forget the source of his strength. His heart was constantly uplifted to God, the great overseer of all, the God of heaven. He exclaimed, he will prosper us. And the words, echoed and re-echoed, thrilled the hearts of all the workers on the wall. But the restoration of the defenses of Jerusalem did not go forward unhindered. Satan was working to stir up opposition and bring discouragement. Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, his principal agents in this movement, now set themselves to hinder the work of rebuilding. They endeavored to cause division among the workmen. They ridiculed the efforts of the builders, declaring the enterprise an impossibility and predicting failure. So from here, we have seen that there was a group of people who conspired together to try to frustrate for the third time the work which was going on. And we are told in the question, who was furious when the reconstruction of the city began to advance under Nehemiah's leadership? So we are told that Tobias, Sanballat, and Geshem teamed up together, and they were furious. They were using discouraging words towards Nehemiah and the team who were very determined to build the temple of God. And that these people, Nehemiah and the team, they were so dedicated, but their work would not go unhindered. And the three agents through whom the devil worked were these characters who have been mentioned: Geshem, Sanballat, and Tobiah. My brother and sister, I'm praying that should not be used as a channel through which the devil accomplishes his work. What can be seen in the enemy's verbal attack? So we can see that this character by the name of Sanballat was actually asking questions. Where are these going? Do they want to rebuild that which has already been burned? So even Tobiah, he mocked the children of Israel to say whatever they were building, even when a fox comes on top of it, it will just crumble, which means they were not doing anything. According to his own judgment, they were doing nothing. There are lessons for us to learn from this, my brothers and sisters, that when we start to do the work of God, even if we are so dedicated and prayerful, and even fasting, the devil will always find a way to try to distract. And he will not use a vacuum. He has to work through some individual so that the work can be frustrated. But when we are committed, God will see us through and we are going to achieve our goal. Let's go to question number 2. How did Nehemiah respond to the opponent's ridicule? Nehemiah chapter 4 verse 4 to 6, and it says, "Hear, O our God, for we are despised, and turn their reproach upon their own head, and give them for a prey in the land of captivity, and cover not their iniquity, and let not their sin be blotted out from before thee. For they have provoked thee to anger before the builders. So built we the wall, and all the wall was joined together unto the half thereof. For the people had the mind to work." Those are the words which are coming from Nehemiah chapter 4 verse 4 to 6, and from the spirit of prophecy. "But the people were commanded not to engage in controversy with their enemies, and to answer them not a word, that no advantage of words might be given them. Threatenings and ridicule were resorted to. They said, Even that which they build, if a fox go up, he shall even break down their stone wall. Sanballat was wroth, and took great indignation, and mocked the Jews. Nehemiah prayed, Hear, O our God, for we are despised, and turn their reproach upon their own head." Testimonies for a Church, volume 3, page 573 and 574. Let's go back to the question. How did Nehemiah respond to the opponent's ridicule? Here, very clear and a very good formula for all of us. Nehemiah commanded his people that they should not enter into controversy with their enemy. And number two, that they should not even open or utter any words against the enemy, lest the enemy takes advantage of any opportunity of the word used. That's what he said. And he continued to pray to God. So three things mentioned: peace, silence, and prayer characterized Nehemiah. He kept quiet, he kept praying, and he commanded his followers to say, keep quiet, don't go into any controversy. This is the formula, golden formula for us today. Whenever we are confronted with enemies, we are trying to do the work of God, and we are being disturbed, confronted, and disrupted, let's not go into controversy with them. We should keep quiet and continue praying. And I think you remember very well in the last Sabbath lesson, we learned that we should not even mistreat them, those who are coming to disrupt the work of God, or as we are working, they are disrupting us. We shouldn't even offend them or treat them harshly. We should continue to depend upon God, and Himself alone will provide a way out. So question 3. In addition to negative comments, how else did the enemies of God's people try to stop the work from being carried out? Nehemiah chapter 4 verse 7 and 8 and says, But it came to pass that when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabians and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were made up, and that the breaches began to be stopped, then they were very wroth, and conspired all of them together to come and to fight against Jerusalem and to hinder it. The case of Nehemiah was presented before me. He was engaged in building the walls of Jerusalem, and the enemies of God were determined that the walls should not be built. In this case, a spirit of hatred and opposition to the Hebrews formed the bond of union and created mutual sympathy among different bodies of men who might otherwise have warred with one another. This well illustrates what we frequently witness in our day in the existing union of men of different denominations to oppose present truth. Men whose only bond seems to be that which is draconic in its nature, manifesting bitterness and hatred against the remnant who keep the commandments of God. These words are coming from Testimonies for a Church, volume 3, page 571 and 572. Let's go back to the question. In addition to negative comments, how else did the enemies of God's people try to stop the work from being carried out? So here we have been told that these three individuals who have been used as instruments of Satan, when they found that they could not move Nehemiah and the team, they had to go and recruit others. Who are these? They were the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites. So the team grew bigger, so that maybe by virtue of numbers, they would be able to move Nehemiah to be frustrated and to stop doing the work. But they still what? They failed. And today, my brothers and sisters, this same spirit exists. People who are supposed to normally be at loggerheads or with a lot of differences, they are ready to unite for one person who is committed to do the right thing. Either spiritually or even physically. People can team up in the background without your knowledge. People who are normally enemies are ready to team up to just destroy one person who is willing to do the will of God. This is the spirit which comes direct from the devil. Actually, in many instances, before Lucifer was cast out of heaven, in many instances, the angels who were rebellious were opposed to one another. But on the point of fighting against Jesus Christ, they united. That's what you find in great controversy. And that same spirit, he manages to plant it in individuals who are willing to be his agents. So you see people who are enemies, on the point of someone they want to kill or to frustrate, they are ready to unite. Very united, and even after finishing, they can continue with their enmities amongst themselves. This is the same spirit, and I am praying that you should not be that person, my brother. You should not be that person, my friend. You should not be that person, my sister. Let us be on the side of God to advance his work. Under the subheading, Day and Night Work, Vigilance and Defense. What other resistance and attacks did the courageous builders meet? So you see, the first three individuals, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, failed at first. When they failed, they said, no, let's find people who can help us. They went, they found the Arabs, the Ammonites, and Ashdodites. They became a bigger group, but they still failed. So let us learn from question number 4. What other resistance and attacks did the courageous builders meet? In addition to the defensive measures put in place, whom did Nehemiah trust? Let's read. Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 9 to 14. It says, "We made our prayer unto our God, and set a watch against them day and night because of them. And Judah said, the strength of the bearers of burdens is decayed, and there is much rubbish, so that we are not able to build the wall. And our adversaries said, they shall not know, neither see, till we come in the midst among them, and slay them, and cause the work to cease. And it came to pass that, when the Jews which dwelt by them came, they said unto us 10 times, from all places whence he shall return unto us, they will be upon you. Therefore set I in the lower places behind the wall, and on the higher places I even set the people after their families, with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked, and rose up, and said unto the nobles, unto the rulers, and to the rest of the people, be not ye afraid of them. Remember the Lord, which is great and terrible, and fight for your brethren, your sons, and your daughters, and your wives, and your houses." At the same time that the Samaritans were plotting against Nehemiah and his work, some of the leading men among the Jews, becoming disaffected, sought to discourage him by exaggerating the difficulties attending the enterprise. Discouragement came from still another source. The Jews which dwelt by those who were taking no part in the work gathered up the statements and reports of their enemies and used these to weaken courage and create disaffection. But taunts and ridicule, opposition and threats seemed only to inspire Nehemiah with firmer determination and to arouse him to greater watchfulness. He recognized the dangers that must be met in this warfare with their enemies, but with courage was undaunted. He made his prayers known unto God, and he set watch against them day and night. Prophets and Kings, page 642 and 643. Let's go back to the question. What other resistance and attacks did the courageous builders meet? So this one came from within. There were some influential leaders within Jerusalem who, because of what they heard from the enemies, came to Nehemiah to discourage him and to exaggerate the difficulties that he and the team were going through. But Nehemiah was not distracted by such attacks and discouragements. In fact, we are told that the more attacks he received, the more determined he became to shame the enemy and his agents. So even today, it is very possible for you and I, my brother, that we can undergo so many obstacles, but we should not be moved by such. Let us focus on Jesus Christ, who is able to work through us so that his work can be accomplished. Question number 5. What measures did the people have to take to keep the construction going? Explain how the wise means of defense that they used apply today to God's church as it presses forward against the powers of darkness. And it came to pass, when our enemies heard that it was known unto us, and God had brought their counsel to naught, that we returned all of us to the war, everyone unto his work. And it came to pass from that time forth, that the half of my servants wrought in the work, and the other half of them held both the spears, the shield, and the bows, and the habergeons, and the rulers were behind all the house of Judah. They which builded on the wall, and they that bare burdens, with those that laded, every one with one of his hands wrought in the work, and with the other hand held a weapon. Take counsel together, and it shall come to naught. Speak the word, and it shall not stand, for God is with us. He disappointeth the devices of the crafty, so that their hands cannot perform their enterprise. Beside Nehemiah stood a trumpeter, and on different parts of the wall were stationed priests bearing the sacred trumpets. The people were scattered in their labors, but on the approach of danger at any point, a signal was given for them to repair without delay. So we labored in the work, Nehemiah says, and half of them held the spears from the rising of the morning till the stars appeared. Those who had been living in towns and villages outside Jerusalem were now required to lodge within the walls, both to guard the work and to be ready for duty in the morning. This would prevent unnecessary delay and would cut off the opportunity which the enemy would otherwise improve of attacking the workmen as they went to and from their homes. Nehemiah and his companions did not shrink from hardship or trying service, neither by day nor by night, nor even during the short time given to sleep did they put off their clothing or lay aside their armor. Prophets and Kings, page 640. This is so extremely intelligent of Nehemiah. I think you can agree with me. And it's so inspiring on our part, because sometimes we get discouraged and kind of retire from work because the conditions under which we are working is kind of frustrating. But Nehemiah has come to inspire all of us. Let's go back to the question, then we can make some comments. And it says, what measures did the people have to take to keep the construction going? So these people were so intelligent. They had to put up defensive mechanism because they expected the enemies to come to distract and to even kill some who would not be suspecting. So they had to put a sword one side and an instrument of work the other side, so that the work would continue. And whenever they heard the enemies coming, they will signal and everyone will be on guard to fight and to defend the work so that it will not be distracted. The other part, explain how the wise means of defense that they use apply today to God's church as it presses forward against the power of darkness. So here we are told that we need to be vigilant also. Let us not just pray, but let us learn to do our part. When we do our part, God is going to give us intelligence and ideas on how we can protect His work. We should not leave the work to be destroyed by the enemy, but we should protect it. Like the children of Israel, what did? They grouped themselves, sometimes they in shifts. One group is going to sleep, the other one is keeping vigilant. And that's the same spirit we need to embrace today. We should team together and fight against all those who are what? Working against the progression of the work of God. And we are told that we should not give up the work. I liked this quotation. We shouldn't give up the work because the circumstances under which we are working are frustrating. Let us commit everything in the hands of God. And then you will see that the enemy and his agents, either outside and more especially in the church, they are going to be all embarrassed and frustrated because the work of God will move in spite of their distraction, like what happened to Nehemiah. So we go into question number 6. How did Nehemiah and the people defend each other against attack, especially in isolated places? As they were united and committed, who fought for them? Who will be with the people even in isolated places in our day, as they also work unitedly and tirelessly to build and strengthen God's spiritual kingdom? Nehemiah chapter 4 verse 18 to 20 says, for the builders, everyone had his sword girded by his side, and so builded. And he that sounded the trumpet was by me. And I said unto the nobles, and to the rulers, and to the rest of the people, the work is great and large, and we are separated upon the wall, one far from another. In what place therefore ye hear the sound of the trumpet, resort ye thither unto us. Our God shall fight for us. Satan takes advantage of every unconsecrated element for the accomplishment of his purposes. Among those who profess to be the supporters of God's cause, there are those who unite with his enemies and thus lay his cause open to the attacks of his bitterest foes. Even some who desire the work of God to prosper will yet weaken the hands of his servants by hearing, reporting, and half-believing the slanders, boasts, and menaces of his adversary. Satan works with marvelous success through his agents, and all who yield to their influence are subject to a bewitching power that destroys the wisdom of the wise and the understanding of the prudent. But, like Nehemiah, God's people are neither to fear nor to despise their enemies. Putting their trust in God, they are to go steadily forward, doing his work with unselfishness, and committing to his providence the cause for which they stand. Prophets and Kings, page 645. That's what we are taught from the Spirit of Prophets. And let's go to the question. How did Nehemiah and the people defend each other against attack, especially in isolated places? They came together and committed their trust in the Lord. As they were united and committed, who fought for them? So here we have seen that it is actually God. They continued to work and God was fighting the rest of the battles on their behalf. who will be with the people, even in the isolated places in our day, as they also work unitedly in the building of his kingdom. So we are told that God will always be with his people. There will be no time when God shall leave his people unattended to. Now, amongst ourselves, we may find ourselves that sometimes we may get discouraged and taken away by the rumors, the false reportings and slanders that may come from those who are opposed to the work of God. We should not be distracted even by those. We should remain steadfast and focused. And the Lord in his own wisdom is going to displace all our enemies. And the work of God is going to what? Succeed. So we go to the last question of today's lesson. Under the subheading, the greatest possible commitment and effort. The greatest possible commitment and effort. What extreme defensive measures were necessary to advance the Lord's work in Nehemiah's day? What happens when God's people deal with similar situations and face similar obstacles now? Nehemiah chapter 4 verse 21 to 23. So we labored in the work, and half of them held the spears from the rising of the morning till the stars appeared. Likewise, at the same time said I unto the people, let everyone with his servant lodge within Jerusalem, that in the night there may be a guard to us, and labor on the day. So neither I, nor my brethren, nor my servant, nor the men of the guard which followed me, none of us put off our clothes, saving that everyone put them off for washing. So total commitment, my brothers and sisters. Amid this great discouragement, Nehemiah made God his trust, his sure defense. And he who was the support of his servant then has been the dependence of his people in every age. In every crisis, his people may confidently declare, if God be for us, who can be against us? Romans chapter 8 verse 31. However craftily the plots of Satan and his agents may be laid, God can detect them and bring to naught all their counsel. The response of faith today will be the response made by Nehemiah. Our God shall fight for us, for God is in the work, and no man can prevent its ultimate success. Prophets and Kings, page 645. Going back to the question, what extreme defensive measure were necessary to advance the Lord's work in Nehemiah's day? So here we have seen that these people went to an extreme of actually dividing in groups. One group guarding, the other group working. When the one group's shift is done, they will go to guard, the other group which was guarding goes to work, so that there will be no disturbance whatsoever, and such that these people went to an extent of not even removing their clothes, except at the point when they wanted to wash them. They would sleep in their clothes to make sure that in case of any disturbance, they would just stand up to start defending the work which was going on. What happens when God's people deal with similar situations and face similar obstacles? Now, we should use the same formula. We should be on guard. Pray to God so that no one can stand against us, because we have a complete trust in God. Because Romans chapter 8 verse 31, it says, if God is for us, who can stand against us? So we should continue to what? Trust in the Lord whenever we are confronted with obstacles, even in the time that we are living in today. Let us trust in the Lord all the time. So as we end the lesson, there are very powerful words of encouragement. They say, in my recent view, I saw that it will not increase our influence or bring us into favor with God to retaliate or come down from our great work to their level in meeting their slanders. There are those who will resort to any species of deception and gross falsehood to gain their object and deceive souls, and to cast stigma upon the law of God and those who love to obey it. They will repeat the most inconsistent and veiled falsehoods over and over until they make themselves believe that they are truth. These are the strongest arguments they have to use against the Sabbath or the fourth commandment. We should not allow our feelings to control us and divert us from the work of warning the world. Very profound words here. Very rebuking and at the same time very, very encouraging. My brother and sister, if you are for the work of God, don't again lower yourself to the standard of those who want to frustrate you. The slanderers, the liars, the gossipers. We have just been instructed that if we lower ourselves to that standard, we shall never ever have a good influence, and it will not do any good to us. But instead, we have to continue to focus on doing the work of God. And God at his own appointed time, he shall bring these slanderers, liars, to shame. I'm hoping that you have benefited much from this lesson and that we can apply it both in spiritual and even in material context, so that you know what to focus on and what not to focus on. Don't allow yourself to be distracted, but continue to do your part and praying to God, committing everything in his hands, and he shall bring them to pass. May these words find a fertile ground in your heart. May you be inspired by the Spirit of God so that you have a detailed and more deeper understanding of how you can focus only on doing his work. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.